So here's a recap of the debrief from last Wednesday. We were sailing at the East Beach venue. The wind was light. We had a really strong down coast current all day. Okay, so we had a strong down coast current. Okay, where I just drew this arrow, this is farther out to sea. Okay, so strong current farther out to sea. And it's safe to assume that the current was a little bit smaller closer to shore. Okay, so we can represent that by the size of the arrow. Wind shown here in purple. Okay, so the wind was also stronger out to sea. Okay, and a little bit lighter on the right side of the course in general. Okay, the wind was shifting right on the right side. It was curving a little bit more and shifting a little bit more to the right on the right side, and on the left we were getting bigger puffs and they were coming farther out of the left. Okay, so we had more wind and left pressure on the left side of the course, and we had a right veer and a little bit less pressure on the right side of the course. Okay, we had a right veer on the right side, and we had a shift on the left side. So here's one arrow, the normal wind direction, and then we would get puffs coming in from this wind direction every once in a while. Okay, we had down coast current shown in green. Okay, stronger on the left, not as strong on the right. The first thing we wanted to talk about in the debrief was these two starting lines, a pin-favored starting line versus a boat-favored starting line, and how the characteristics determine how you will approach them and how your boat accelerates toward them. Okay, so we have a boat at the pin end favored starting line and a boat at the boat end favored starting line. I tried to put them the same distance from the line, but actually the boat favored starting, this boat is farther from the line than this boat. I copied this boat off of this boat, and this circle right here is the mark. Okay, so if we drag this boat to where it's the same distance from the boat end as this boat, it's going to be all the way up there. Okay, it's going to be over early. Okay, so that illustrates the point that on a boat favored starting line, you will end up to the much closer to the starting line much sooner, much easier, and you will cross it much faster when you accelerate. On a pin favored starting line, you will cross the line much slower because you're almost going parallel to it, right? Especially if it's 45 degrees pin favored. Okay, so if the wind clocks to where it's coming from this direction, and then this boat's angle is something more like this, okay, then he can't actually lay the starting line. So the more pin favored it is, the longer it's going to take you to accelerate across it, and the faster. So think about this factor, and very few, especially opti sailors, factor this into their starting strategy. Okay, it takes a lot longer to get to and to cross a pin favored starting line than it does a boat favored starting line. If the whole fleet accelerates at 10 seconds on a boat favored starting line, they're all going to be over at it. On a pin favored starting line, there's a very good chance that much less of them will be over early. Okay, so when the wind is very light, when you have a strong down coast current, when you have an extended starting line, the current is lighter inshore, the wind is stronger offshore, what should your strategy be? Okay, so the first obvious thing is that you want to be right here when the gun goes off. You want to win the start right at the end. Okay, so we had, in fact, a pin favored starting line on this day. So let's get rid of that. We don't need them. Okay, we're talking about this starting line. This is what we actually had. So in this situation with the pin favored line, let's make some rules that we want to make sure to never break. Okay, so the couple observations about all of the things that are on the screen right now. Current and wind, light wind makes it hard to get to the line. Current pushing you away from the line also makes it hard to get to the line. The pin being favored also makes it hard to cross the line. So you have three things working against you when you're trying to cross the line, which means you never want to get anywhere far from it. okay? Especially if you are trying to start at the pin. We had one start where Svenja was hanging out right around here, right when the gun went off at 2 minutes. She was holding on to the coach boat, and I told her she needed to get going because she wasn't going to make it to where she needed to be to have a good starting time. And she said, "What are you talking about? The starting line's right here. I'm 30 seconds away." And I said, "Okay, we'll see what happens." And she ended up making it to about here when the gun went off, and everyone else over here port tacked the fleet, and they were launched. Okay, so rule number 1: never more than 2 boat lengths away. Why am I not typing? Okay, and now that should be from the pin end, really. Okay, we don't 2 boat lengths away, and what I mean by 2 boat lengths away is 2 boat lengths in the wrong direction far away from it. So here's the line, 2 boat lengths. Okay, well, I guess if a boat's that big, it should be a little farther away. But 2 boat lengths. Here's our 2 boat length line, okay? Because the current is pushing in this direction, the wind is pushing in this direction. If we're above this line, we can be 4 boat lengths above up here because we can go with the current and with the wind and blast right down into space, into the right space in half a second. But we never want to be more than 2 boat lengths away from the line in this direction, okay? Because to go the opposite direction and make that distance back with all of these factors that we have going on is very, very difficult and will take a good amount of time, especially in a big fleet where you get all of these boats that could be sitting on your wind up here. It could take you the whole starting sequence just to get into place, okay? So you want to be very, very smart about where you choose to hang out in this type of situation. A very good place to be is, well, I deleted our line, but anywhere above this line, okay? Above the starting line even, because you can dip down below it in half a second or up over here. So this is kind of what I was hoping to see you guys do when we set this drill up and then set this starting line up. What ended up happening first drill is most of you guys actually started at the boat, and Liam port tacked the fleet really easily with no one contesting him for it. Just stop to think about what other rules we need for this situation, and for the most part, we just need all the normal starting rules that you would always have. And aside from that, rule number 1 is really all we need for all of these factors: this line skew, this current, and the wind. Let's keep it simple. Okay, understand what the current, the wind, and the line skew mean. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to cross the line in a quick amount of time at the favored end. So you need to stay here, right here, ready the whole time. What we saw in practice was people would drift about a boat length to 2 boat lengths away while they're setting up, holding their spot on the line like you normally would, but when they accelerated to go, it took them 3 or 4 times as long to cover the same distance as normal, so we had a lot of people starting late. The rules I have up here are, they're not rules, they're more of a pre-start procedure. The pre-start research, gathering information, collecting procedure that you need to go through before every single race you ever do. This was our big weakness at the last regatta we had in Marina del Rey, okay? It was also the big weakness for most of you guys in this practice that we're talking about right now, because you failed to do these 4 things, okay? Number 1, you always, always, always need to check the starting line before every race you ever do, ever. Here is a boat sitting at the pin end of the starting line, ready to check the line. They're pointing directly straight upwind, okay? So this is where you need to put yourself to check the line. Pointing perfectly straight into the wind, which means your boat is completely flat, okay? Because if you're leaning to one side or the other, that can skew your reading. And your boom needs to be directly over your centerboard, directly over your rudder, right down the middle of your boat. So you're perfectly head to wind. Your boat's completely flat, and that's how you know, okay? Then you're going to look 90 degrees off the side of your boat and sight where the line should be. Okay, so here's a square. This is a right angle off of your boat, okay? And that purple line, when I can get it to show up, that purple line is what the starting line should look like, okay? So that boat is pointing directly straight upwind. You're sighting 90 degrees off the boat, and that's what the starting line should look like, okay? You compare that to what it actually does look like, and that's how you can see the line skew. Favorite way to check the starting line, and it's because it gives you an accurate visual representation of exactly how skewed one side of the line is relative to the other. And it gives you the visual representation of exactly how advantaged one certain point on the starting line is relative to another. So you can see if you start right at the pin end, you're starting this distance ahead of someone who starts at the boat end. Okay? Now that's a lot, but the pin end is very risky and can stack up and cause problems, and you can have a bad start there. So sometimes you might want to start here, okay, in this location, because you're only giving up this much distance relative to someone winning the pin in that location. Okay, that's not a lot of distance when you factor in the risk of starting at the pin. So sometimes this might be a good start. So you can factor in that maybe starting in this position is this much distance. You can see a visual representation of the starting line skew if you check the line this way. You need to check the line this way before every sailboat start you ever do in your entire life, okay? Or you need to find a way that works better for you. Yeah, I know that this way works. Okay, so once you have a very good idea of what the starting line is going to look like, you can move on to other things, okay? Which is wind and current is most likely the next thing you're going to look for, okay? Current, throw some sunscreen in the water off of a buoy and watch where it goes. That's the best way to do it, as long as you have sunscreen that doesn't dissipate too much in the water. You can watch it off a buoy. When it looks like a buoy is motoring in one direction or another, that's a giveaway that there's a good amount of current, and it'll tell you the direction. But the best way is to put something in the water that can't be affected by the wind and watch where it goes relative to something that's anchored, and that will tell you the speed and direction of the current, okay? And you can factor that into your race strategy. Current rules: current moves faster in deeper water, slower in shallow water, okay? So you got to think about things like that. Wind, you want to know the wind variations in speed and in direction, okay? So the wind goes up and down, it puffs and it lulls, and it does that in different places. Today, in this example, the wind was lighter on the right and puffs were coming in up from the left, okay? The direction was pretty much straight down the page, but when a puff came in from the left, it would shift to the left as it came in. On the right side of the course, the wind was bending towards the right geographically, so you would get a little bit of a righty going to the right side of the course. And the wind variation, the wind difference from side to side was very, very much, like half a knot at the most. It was slight, but you could notice it. And when the left puffs came in, then it was maybe 2 knots windier on the left side of the course. So you need to factor all of those things into your strategy, and you need to actually have a flat strategy. Rule 3, predict fleet psychology. Well, you have to understand that in a smart fleet, everyone else is doing all of these same things as well. Okay, so they're all likely to come up with the same strategy. We're all going to win the pin, dig into the left pressure, take the first lefty to the right side, and get some current relief, right? So now when there's more people trying to do that, that strategy becomes riskier. So those who can see that ahead of time know that they need to start a little bit up from the mess, tack out, maybe get some clear air first, then come back, get the shift, and then go into the current relief. The strategy is worse, but the tactics are better. Okay, strategy is the best way to get your boat around the course with no other boats. The tactics are the boat-on-boat relationship. Okay, so that's a better tactical choice because it's much less risk. Okay, less risk is usually good, but usually you get rewarded for taking big risks. So it's a managing risk type scenario. So in general, this starting line pre-start procedure of collecting information and formulating a strategy is our team's biggest weakness. Okay, so this is what we need to improve on this weekend. This is what we need to see fixed. We need to go into every single race with a formulated strategy after doing our research. Okay, checking the line especially. You can check the line multiple times. Sometimes if you check the line every 5 minutes, that will help you to dial into the wind shifts. Okay, you can check the line, and if they haven't moved the line but suddenly the boat's favored when the pin used to be favored, then you know the wind went right. And when you check it 5 minutes later and it's square, you know it went back left. When you check it 5 minutes later and the boat's favored, you know it went back right. When you check it 5 minutes later and the pin's favored, you know, whoa, it went back left. And then you can start to maybe guess that there's 2 right shifts for every 1 left shift, and you can dial into the wind pattern that way. But the most important thing is that when there's a giant, obvious pin-favored starting line with current and wind, current pushing everyone away from the start line, and light wind, we need to be here, okay? We need to be here. And we're not doing our pre-start research, and we're getting caught here.